I recently installed this faux board and batten wall treatment across an entire room for my friend's baby nursery. I'm going to share my best 12 tips so you can avoid mistakes and find success with your board and batten installation. First, I want to introduce myself. I'm Melissa, an avid DIYer who started as a stay-at-home mom wanting to make her house look beautiful on a budget. Today, I've built designs out of my wildest dreams, renovated an entire house by myself, and amassed a following of more than 1.3 million followers across my social media channels. I hope watching this video can help you in your faux board and batten wall treatment. It's faux because there are no boards. Traditional board and batten is like install wide boards, then install a thin batten to cover the seam where the boards meet. Here, you simply install battens on the wall to achieve the modern and three-dimensional look without the boards. To preface this installation, I want to share the main mistake I made that I wish I could have avoided. I was doing this project far away from my home and on a time crunch, so I had to purchase all the lumber and cut it ahead of time. When heading to the lumber store to pick out trim, it's important that you consider the thickness. I used pre-primed pine trim that was 9/16 inches thick to match with the existing casing around the window and doors in the room. If I had purchased like a 1x4, it would have looked so bad sticking out too far. But the big problem was that the store only had 12 or so trim boards in stock, the thickness that I needed. I had to supplement with 7/16 inch boards, and to account for the 1/8 inch depth difference, I cut dozens of these spacers to put behind and bring the lumber flush. This caused a major annoyance during install, and especially during caulking, as you can see later in this video. Learn from my mistake, source your materials in the same thickness, making multiple trips if you have to, or order your lumber ahead of time. Now, let's jump into install with tip number 1. Be sure to install baseboards perfectly level. It's so important so that you can cut all your battens the same length and it will work out on the top. Nail in your baseboard using a level. It won't necessarily be flush against the floor. If you're against carpet, this will look fine. If you have hard floors, you could add shoe molding to cover any gaps. My next tip is don't ever use adhesive. The previous wall treatment in this room was installed with construction glue and caused so much drywall damage when I removed it. Nails are enough to hold up your wall treatment, especially when following the rest of my tips in this video. Find studs where you can to shoot your nails into solid wood, but if you're not on a stud, use tip number 3, which is shoot nails at crisscrossing angles. I set the depth on my nailer a little lower than normal to account for the nail shooting in at an angle. This demonstration I did during a different wall treatment install illustrates this concept. If you shoot straight, the boards can come right out and will definitely pull away from the wall over time. But when you trigger the nail gun in one direction, then the opposite direction, it holds the trim tight to the drywall and is not easily removed. Be sure to choose a nail that accounts for the thickness of the drywall, 1/2 inch, plus the thickness of your batten, whatever that may be, and maybe just 1/4 inch longer. You don't want a nail that's too long for fear of hitting electrical or plumbing behind your walls. If you're a creative like me looking to expand your skills or master your craft, you need to check out this video's sponsor, Craftsy. Craftsy is an online community where millions of crafters, makers, and DIY enthusiasts learn from friendly award-winning instructors teaching step-by-step video demonstrations. It's a platform tailored to learning your craft from experts, so you can skip sifting through the conflicting advice from random folks online who may or may not know what they're talking about. With over 2,000 classes in more than 20 categories and more added constantly, there's something new to learn every day. I have delved into baking, cooking, cake decorating, drawing, painting, quilting, crocheting, knitting, and most importantly, sewing. I've always wanted to learn how to sew. Craftsy has also leveled up my cooking skills. I learned to heat the pan before adding my oil or fat to prevent food from sticking to the bottom. I've also enjoyed connecting with other like-minded creatives in an environment that is so encouraging. Craftsy is a community of driven doers, makers, and DIYers who strive to express themselves through their craft. It's your online resource for all things creative. If this speaks to you, click the link in the description to access my special discount. The first 1,000 people to click the link will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. go.craftsy.com/welcome to the woods. My fourth and probably the best tip is to use a board and batten calculator to work out the design of vertical battens before starting. This free one online has you plug in dimensions of each wall and the width of the battens to space everything evenly for you without the mental math. It tells you the exact space between battens so you can just cut a spacer. Tip number 5 is to use that spacer. Don't measure or even level each board. Install the first board with your 4-foot level and then rely on your spacer to build from there. Of course, I check every so often things are staying straight, but the spacer board expedites install greatly. When you're installing board and batten across the whole room, none of your walls are going to have exactly the same dimensions. Therefore, you're going to have all different size spacers. If the space between the battens is within an inch or so, it tricks the eye and no one can ever tell. Another tip is to plan around obstacles like vents and outlets so you don't have unsightly cuts. This might be impossible if you're doing the whole room. I hit one outlet with a batten and had to decide what to do. There are different methods to build around the outlet. Some people use extra wood that's the same thickness as the batten to carry it around and then use an outlet extender to pull their electrical forward, as shown here. I prefer the look where you simply cut out of the batten around your outlet plate using a jigsaw. You'll see I also replaced my outlet cover here with a paintable, more modern one. Tip number 7 is, if you have one, use a laser level. It makes the whole project easier, especially on the top board. Make sure this one is level because it's the most visible to the naked eye. If your room is large enough that you must have a seam in your top board, plan for it to land over a batten for support and cut it at an angle so that the cut line is as thin and discreet as possible. At this point, I'm done adding trim, but you can make yours with a top cap, shoe molding inside each box, or whatever designs you're drawn to. I was going for simplistic and modern, so that's why I chose a wide batten and a minimalistic look. Tip number 9 is for that professional finish, use wood filler and caulking before paint. Wood filler gets applied to the face seams or anywhere a seam meets flush against another. Imperfections in the wood and divots from nail holes should also get wood filler. When that's dried, sand it down and then do your caulking. Caulk is applied to any corner seam like where battens touch the drywall. This will also keep the wall treatment in place over time since you didn't use adhesive. I underestimated how much effort caulking would be with this many seams. 2.5 tubes and 4.5 hours later, I was finally done. Another tip is fill large gaps with inexpensive backer rod before caulking. I did this in each seam where I had put a 1/8 inch spacer behind the trim. The backer rod stabilizes the caulk and prevents it from cracking when you're trying to make it fill a spot that's too wide. Wall treatments take extra effort to paint. If you have raw drywall or joint compound, raw wood, or a particularly glossy surface anywhere, be sure to prime before painting, even if you're using a primer and paint in one product. With so many different depths to account for, the best finish is achieved by spraying. But if you're like me and you don't want to tape and mask off the whole room to spray your paint, consider using a 4-inch mini roller to accurately paint the board and batten. I was able to use just my little roller to paint all the seams and edges of this complicated wall treatment without using a paintbrush. Rolling on the paint gave me an opaque and even finish so that I only had to do touch-up after instead of a full second coat. My 12th and last tip for you is to use a metal drywall knife to edge along your baseboard. I did this even with a roller. Ideally, you'd use a bigger knife like 12 or 18 inch, but my 6-inch knife is all that I have packed along. This tip prevents you from having to tape, and the metal holds down the carpet nicely. If you have a hard floor, use a thin plastic folder and slide it underneath your trim to do this same method. A whole room board and batten wall treatment sure is a ton of work, but it is so worth it. Just look at how this room has completely transformed in just a few days. If you love DIY design and are looking for more solo home improvement projects, subscribe to my channel. Welcome to the woods.